World War II was one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, resulting in an unprecedented loss of life across the globe. The total number of deaths during this period is estimated to be between 70 million and 85 million people. These figures include military personnel, civilians, and those who died as a result of war-related famine, disease, and other indirect consequences of the war. The devastating impact of World War II varied greatly from country to country, reflecting differences in population scale, military involvement, and the intensity of combat and occupation. The Soviet Union suffered the highest number of total deaths among all nations involved in the conflict. Estimates suggest that approximately 24 million Soviet citizens perished during the war. This staggering number includes military deaths as well as civilian casualties caused by combat, occupation, atrocities, massacres, forced labor, and starvation. The brutal Eastern Front and the scorched earth tactics employed by both sides contributed significantly to the immense loss of life within the USSR. The civilian death toll was particularly high in places like Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states, where Nazi and Soviet occupations led to mass executions and atrocities. The siege of Leningrad alone resulted in hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths due to starvation and bombardment. The Soviet Union's high death toll was also due to the intense battles fought on its territory and the brutal campaigns against partisans and civilians. Germany also experienced a devastating loss of life, with estimates suggesting that around 7 million to 8.5 million Germans died during the war. This includes military personnel and civilians who perished as a result of bombings and other war-related causes. The bombing campaigns conducted by the Allies targeted German cities, causing widespread destruction and civilian casualties. The Holocaust led to the systematic murder of approximately 6 million Jews, along with millions of other victims, including Romani people, disabled individuals, Poles, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. The war's end and the subsequent occupation of Germany led to further suffering and displacement for millions of Germans. Poland suffered immense losses, with estimates indicating that approximately 5.9 million to 6 million Poles perished during the war. A significant proportion of these deaths were civilians, victims of Nazi occupation and extermination policies. The Holocaust claimed the lives of about 3 million Polish Jews, representing the majority of Poland's Jewish population. Additionally, many ethnic Poles and members of the Polish resistance lost their lives fighting against occupying forces. The destruction of Polish cities and infrastructure was also extensive, reflecting the brutal nature of the occupation and combat. China experienced significant casualties during World War II, with estimates of total deaths ranging from 15 million to 20 million. The conflict in China began earlier, with the Second Sino-Japanese War starting in 1937 and merging into the broader conflict of World War II. Chinese civilians suffered tremendously from Japanese invasions, massacres, and atrocities, including the infamous Nanjing Massacre, where hundreds of thousands of civilians and prisoners of war were murdered. The prolonged conflict led to widespread famine, disease, and displacement, affecting millions. The Chinese resistance included both military and civilian efforts, which incurred heavy casualties. Japan suffered the loss of approximately 2.5 million to 3.1 million lives, with military personnel making up a significant portion of these deaths. The country faced extensive bombing campaigns, especially in cities like Tokyo, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, which also became the first and only instances of nuclear weapon use in warfare. The atomic bombings led to immediate and long-term suffering for thousands of civilians. Japan's military campaigns across Asia and the Pacific resulted in the deaths of millions of soldiers and civilians in countries such as Korea, the Philippines, and Southeast Asian nations. The war's conclusion with Japan's surrender marked a significant turning point, with profound consequences for the Japanese population. The United States experienced a total of around 400,000 military deaths. American casualties were primarily due to combat in Europe and the Pacific theaters, including major battles such as D-Day, the Battle of Midway, and the Battle of the Bulge. The U.S. also suffered civilian casualties from attacks such as the attack on Pearl Harbor and the atomic bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war transformed the United States into a global superpower and led to significant social and economic changes within the country. The United Kingdom saw approximately 450,000 military and civilian deaths. British civilians endured extensive bombings during the Blitz, which targeted cities like London, Coventry, and Liverpool, causing massive destruction and loss of life. British armed forces fought in multiple theaters, including North Africa, Italy, and Northwest Europe. The war also resulted in the displacement of many civilians and the suffering caused by rationing and destruction. France suffered around 600,000 deaths, including military personnel and civilians. French civilians endured occupation and the destruction caused by fighting, especially during the liberation campaigns in 1944 and 1945. The Holocaust also claimed the lives of thousands of French Jews. The French resistance played a crucial role in fighting against occupation and contributed to the Allied victory. Other countries also experienced significant losses. Italy lost around 450,000 people, including soldiers and civilians. The country was a major Axis power and endured extensive bombings and battles in North Africa and Europe. The Netherlands suffered approximately 200,000 deaths, mainly due to Nazi occupation and the famine in 1944 to 1945, often called the Hunger Winter. Yugoslavia suffered heavy casualties with estimates around 1 million deaths, including civilians and soldiers, as it was heavily involved in partisan warfare and suffered brutal occupation policies. Greece also experienced substantial loss of life, with estimates about 300,000 deaths resulting from occupation and resistance fighting. In Southeast Asia and the Pacific, the Philippines lost over 1 million people, many of whom were civilians killed during Japanese occupation and battles. Indonesia also suffered heavy casualties as it was occupied by Japanese forces and experienced significant violence and upheaval. The Pacific Islands saw intense fighting between Allied and Japanese forces, leading to high casualties for both military and civilian populations. In summary, the human cost of World War II was profound and widespread, affecting virtually every corner of the globe. Countries like the Soviet Union and Poland experienced some of the highest death tolls, reflecting their central roles in the conflict and the brutality of the campaigns fought on their soil. The Holocaust and other genocides resulted in the systematic murder of millions of innocent civilians. The war also caused immense suffering through bombings, atrocities, forced migrations, and long-term health impacts. Understanding these figures is essential to appreciating the immense sacrifice and tragedy of this global conflict, and underscores the importance of striving for peace and reconciliation in the aftermath of such devastation.